You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
T-Wolves erase a 23-point deficit, but they just run out of gas at the end after Ant gets ejected with 2 more techs. Final score versus the Lakers in LA, 111-102. What's going on? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves postcast episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman with me as always. Give him a follow on X if you haven't already, at JRBorman13. Jack, lots to get into from this one. Ant suspension tomorrow after 2 more techs, plus DDV's first game back. Terrence Shannon balling out again. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so Wolves coming off the win of the year, epic 25-point comeback versus OKC. Tough to follow that up regardless of the opponent, but especially versus this kind of new look and kind of red-hot Lakers team as of late. They built a 23-point lead in the second quarter, but the Wolves chip away. It almost felt like deja vu a la Monday night, especially with no Ant on the court in the second half. Had his 15th and 16th techs. He gets the boot. More on that a little bit later. Wolves get within 3 in the end, but again, just kind of run out of gas. Missed free throws was a huge part of the final couple minutes. Jaden and Nas with a couple rough outings tonight. Wolves drop back to 32 and 28. Big picture, real quick, just to start, Jack. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, big picture, the good has got to be Terrence Shannon Jr.'s future. Looks very bright in Minnesota. The bad, the Wolves just continue to dig themselves in these massive holes early in these games. And then the ugly, I mean, Ant-Man teed up not once but twice. Again, he'll miss tomorrow night's game versus the Jazz. Big picture, what's your kind of knee-jerk reaction after this one?
Yeah. I mean, matchup of 2 teams that are certainly in the thick of it for the race for, a top 4 spot, staying out of the play-in line in the top 6 for sure. I mean, LeBron just looks completely reinvigorated. I mean, a couple of last times we've seen LeBron, he's looked pretty old, and I hate using that word to describe LeBron because he's, just been a mainstay of really my entire life as just an all-time figure, and he certainly was awesome tonight. Started 6 of 7 for 17 points in that first half, and I think you just got to love the way that this team is competing regardless of what the score is, and I think it speaks a lot about the culture that the Timberwolves have built here, under Chris Finch and Mike Conley and and all those guys in the locker room. That the game certainly felt over early in this game in the second quarter, but they just kept at it, and you got to give them a lot of credit to that. And then, again, Wolves just 4 of 10 now 4 and 10 on the season when they shoot less than 30% from 3. And it's hilarious that 2 of those wins have come against OKC, because when you shoot less than 30% against OKC, the rest of the NBA 0 and 18, but the Timberwolves are 2 and 0 in those games. But yeah, and then the other one for me, just Anthony Edwards, totally selfish of him to get kicked out of that game. I've seen some people in the comments talking about, why isn't Luka getting texts, but Ant and Nas are. Ant and Nas are cussing at the refs and saying stuff that's over the line. And Luka is not, cussing the refs. He may be crying and complaining more, but he's not saying stuff that all these refs are going to immediately want to tee a guy up for.
Not getting vulgar like some of these other guys.
Yeah. Look, I swear all the time. Okay. I get it, but I'm not swearing at people all the time. Ant's got to find a way to stop swearing. You listen to him in the locker room, and every third or fourth word out of his mouth is a swear word, and he's got to find a way to just not direct that at the refs. Because at this point, it's an Anthony Edwards problem, and it's selfish of him to not realize that, this team needs him so desperately, especially when every game matters now down the stretch of this season, when you look at how tight the Western Conference standings are right now. And for Ant, if he continues on this trajectory, there's no way he's not going to pick up 18 techs, which would get him another suspension. So it's he 15 and 16 tonight. So once you hit 16, you get suspended for 1 game. So he gets suspended for tomorrow. And then every other technical foul, he gets the rest of the way. So on technical foul number 18, 1 game suspension, 20, another 1 game suspension, 22, another 1 game suspension. And so that'll get reset, once we get into the playoffs. But I mean, it's just a problem, and he's got to fix it, and it's completely on him, and it's selfish at this point that he hasn't realized how important he is to this team and find a way to change his behavior. So
what pool do you put that under for Ant? Is that just like an immaturity thing? Was that one of the last remaining things you were kind of waiting to see from Ant going into this year, just trying to round out and kind of clean up the immaturity part of his game? And also, now that he will officially be suspended, is there any hope from you that maybe this kind of flips the switch for him and it finally clicks in? Like, okay, I gotta go the Jaden McDaniels route and just keep it monotone and no expressions on my face, because now it's getting real. Before this, of course, it's annoying, but at this point, like this matters. Like losing your dude every other tee now, that hurts, and that's going to add up quick.
For sure. And I mean, I think you have to give Ant credit for what he did last year. I mean, he was right up against that suspension line last year and completely cut it out for the last 20, 25 games of the season. We're in a similar spot now, but he's gotten, technicals at a higher rate. I mean, he had 16. I don't think anyone else in the league has more than 11. So, I mean, everyone in the comments complaining, you can be mad at me all you want to, but like, Ant is doing this at a significantly higher rate than everyone else in the league, more than Draymond, more than, every other guy that's notorious for picking up techs. So it's just got to change. And it's unfortunate because, Ant is such a likable player, but the league has really come down hard on him for him, not finding a way to being able to rein it in between all the fines and now this. So, I mean, certainly I completely agree that some of these refs take stuff too personally. No question about it. But like, you have to know that refs are going to do that anyways. And the controllable is Ant not complaining. The controllable is not how the referees respond to Ant complaining. So
is there any? Yeah, no, I get it. A lot of frustration from a lot of the fans, especially in the chat right now. Is there any underlying message here as far as these last 2 games and kind of like when the chips are all down? I'm trying to find a positive here. I'm trying to switch gears. When the chips are all down and that final nail is about to be buried in the coffin, this team, and especially feels like these young guys led by Terrence Shannon, which we'll touch on here in a bit, there's just no quit. And you got to love that mindset, that energy, because it is kind of that human element of the game that can carry over throughout a long season and into the playoffs, can it not? Like why the big deficit so often in so many of these games as of late to begin with, but then what's been the catalyst or kind of spark in your eyes that's given them that extra kind of gear to just keep chipping away out of these big leads?
Yeah, for sure. I think, the biggest thing is that first of all, I think it's important that the Timberwolves have responded, because you can keep digging yourself in these holes and the games can just be over right away. And I think that would weigh pretty heavily on a team. But yeah, I think if you want to focus on what they're doing to get out of it, I think, tonight, especially what was important was Ant had an awesome second quarter. He had 9 points, 2 assists, no turnovers, looked way more comfortable and under control. And was taking what the defense was giving him, was creating a ton of wide open shots for his teammates. And it was just a bummer that the Wolves could have climbed into this game a lot faster if they were knocking down some of their open corner threes. I think Nikhil and Jaden were 0 of 7 in the corners in the first half of this game. And so that was a bummer. But yeah, I think, certainly they look to get out and run more. And they did that with TJ Shannon for sure. I think, each of the first 2 or 3 rebounds that TJ had, he just flew up the floor himself and took it in for scores, which is exactly what you want. I mean, he had 8 fast break points tonight by himself. The Lakers had 7, so he outscored the Lakers on the fast break by himself. And the Lakers coming into this game, have been an excellent fast break team of late coming in. Lakers number 3 in fast break points in the last 5 games, and they're number 6 in the league in fast break point differential. And so for TJ Shannon to outscore them by himself en route to a career high 25-point night on 15 shots, so super efficient. was awesome. And I think, he led the way in the bench, outscoring the Lakers 53-19, which is awesome. And I think that's a really important element of getting Donte DiVincenzo back into the mix, is that I think for guys like Nikhil, it allows them to shift into more of a natural spot where you're probably able to get some cleaner looks coming off the bench than you would having to start. And so, or at least playing a significant portion of your minutes with the starters, for sure, just because there's probably going to be some lineups that have some better spacing out there. And so I think, again, the Timberwolves, the last few games, really the last 10 games have been right at the bottom of the league in bench scoring, and their starters have had to carry a really heavy load. So I think the more that you can space that out between your starters and your bench is going to be huge. And TJ Shannon's been a huge part of that. And everything about his game tonight, I thought, was pretty sustainable in that, he just turned the jetpack boosters that he's got on and his feet on and was just blowing by everybody. And in a game that had LeBron James in it, I mean, he was the best athlete on the floor and it wasn't even close. And it's not often you can say that about a rookie, regardless of, him being 24 or not. So he was fantastic in this game, and I'm really excited to see what he can do tomorrow in an extended role. And I hope the Timberwolves start Terrence Shannon tomorrow, because he deserves it with the way that he's been playing, and he's pretty clearly emerged as a guy that they've got to keep in the rotation now, because he just brings an element to the game that no one else does, and that's really important moving forward.
It's just a breath of fresh air to hear you say that. Again, my guy since the draft, I love that they grabbed him. Obviously, it was the Dilly show right away. Then Jalen Clark had his big kind of breakout game. But as of late, Terrence Shannon, you're right, too. It's the way I describe it, just the way I see it. It's that extra horsepower he's got under the hood. He's not necessarily the biggest guy or the quickest guy with the acceleration, change of direction. It's just that tenacity and aggressiveness to get downhill, and it's just so fun to watch, man. Absolutely. All right, plenty more deep dive from this one. I want to ask you about Jalen Clark's new deal as well. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel's giving you a chance at a huge return, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Why I love FanDuel? When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 bet. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get on some NBA future action while you're there. Naz Reid 6 Men of the Year odds sitting at 5-1 right now. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com. You can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Real quick before we get in a little bit more deep dive, Jalen Clark signed through next year. Gotta love that. Bones Highland signs a 2-way deal. Quick thoughts and reaction to both those moves, just real quick.
Yeah, super well deserved for Jalen Clark. I think the fact that he signed for the rest of this season and then next season only a 2-year deal technically, but the fact that it wasn't a longer term deal, I think speaks to his representation's confidence that he'll be able to cash in sooner. And so, really cool story for Jalen to be able to come back from that Achilles injury, play super well, and now earn a full-time guaranteed roster spot this year. It's guaranteed this year, guaranteed next year at the league minimum for both seasons. So really cool story. And then for Bones Highland, yeah, I mean, Tim Connolly drafted him back in 2021 in Denver, kind of a guy who plays like maybe a little bit more of a polished Rob Dillingham at this point. A little less athleticism, a little bit better of a shooter, a little bit worse of a handle. So kind of that same type of, bench guard that could give you, 16, 17 points, but also could give you 0 points on 4 shots and 3 turnovers. So you just kind of don't really know what you're going to get, but I think it's a good flyer to take on a 2-way contract, especially considering that, that might be a guy that you look at to backfill, potentially Josh Minot not being on the roster next year. Maybe he takes one of those vet minimum spots that, you definitely need when you have a roster as expensive as the Wolves. So I like both moves. Again, maybe would have liked to see another big guy on a 2-way spot, but I understand what Tim Connolly's doing. Obviously has a relationship with him, tried to get him to Minnesota, last season at the trade deadline. Didn't work out with Bones Highland going to the Clippers. And so then Bones Highland was traded to the Hawks at the deadline this year and then waived. So Tim Connolly taking care of his guys, fine with me, zero risk, somewhat of an upside. So I like it.
DDV, you kind of touched on this already, but first game back after missing 19 straight. What'd you just like the most, I guess, about seeing him back on the court for the first time in a while? What's he going to bring to the table that the Wolves have needed the most? And I guess kind of part two, what is the ripple effect with any new rotations or adjustments with DDV back in the mix?
Yeah, I mean, for those that forgot, Donte DiVincenzo started the last 6 games before he got hurt. He was averaging 17.5 points, 42% from three, shooting almost 10 3-point attempts per game. Him and Ant were shooting about 20 3-point attempts per game between the two of them, both shooting over 40%. So those two guys were awesome. And he also settled into a much better job as a playmaker, with an assist to turnover ratio north of 2. So it was just really solid shooting and creation that the Wolves sorely needed. I think he kind of found the kind of balance to strike between catching and shooting and playing off the catch and driving and kicking and getting some good ball movement going. And he did a lot of that again tonight. I mean, he had 6 assists for the Timberwolves, which I think was a team high in just 23 minutes off the bench. And he was 3 of 6 from 3 tonight, and everyone else was 9 of 35. So for which, is like, what is that? I don't even know. Can't do the math off the top of my head. 25 and like 26% from 3 outside of him. And I think he had a minutes restriction right around 25 minutes because he checked out with the Wolves down 5 with 6 minutes left. And he was, probably their second best player on the floor at that point besides TJ Shannon. So I think that they probably adhered to that pretty strictly so that he could potentially play tomorrow. And obviously that's going to be even more important now that Ant is not going to play. And so, yeah, I think just in terms of the rotation, they very clearly tried to get him out there when Ant was not on the floor in those, non-Ant minutes with Jaden and with Nas so that he could kind of help with some of the scoring there. But I also think that there's so much spacing in those lineups and they move the ball so well and they play with such a pace that I think that would probably help get him some easier looks in transition and just kind of get him in an offense that's got a little bit more flow rather than with the starters that's been a little choppy, obviously, even without Julius and Donte. So, yeah, I think the other part of it too is Mike started tonight, I think more so in part because with Donte, it's much easier to control a guy's minutes who's on a minutes restriction when he's coming off the bench. You kind of get to pick and choose the spots of where you're putting him in there. So that was important for the Wolves. And then, yeah, I think with some of the rotation stuff, Jaden McDaniels was playing the backup 5 a lot more. Mm-hmm. And so with the way they were guarding Jaden McDaniels early in the game, I mean, JJ Redick's an awesome coach, really smart guy. And so he just started having Jackson Hayes guarding Jaden McDaniels and sagging off of him for the entire first half. And that allowed the Lakers to build a really good wall against Anthony Edwards, pack the paint with boxes and elbows, but then having, that 5th guy really just in the paint ready to help and shut off some of those passing lanes. So what did the Timberwolves do? They had Jaden McDaniels play really more of that Rudy Gobert role where he was just setting a ton of screens for Mike Conley, for Anthony Edwards, early on in the second half. And I think kind of helped Jaden get into more of a scoring rhythm and flow. I mean, for Jaden, he took a team high 18 shots, only made 6 of them. Yeah. He's got to be able to shoot the ball better from 3. Like we talked about, he was 0-4 in the corners in the first half, finally got one to go in the fourth quarter there. But yeah, I think for Jaden, a lot of the shots he took were good shots. I think there were maybe, 3 or 4 ones that he'd probably like to have back just in terms of shot selection stuff. But I think the fact that he's taking that many shots is a good thing, and he's getting to his spots consistently is certainly important in and of itself. So, I think it's interesting that he's playing the backup 5. We'll see if that changes, tomorrow when the Wolves play a team that's got some more traditional big men. But just because the Lakers, are really playing Jared Vanderbilt as a backup 5, who's like 6'7", 6'8", and then Dorian Finney-Smith, who's 6'7", also getting some backup 5 minutes. So, we'll see what happens, but I certainly am keen to see whether Terrence Shannon starts tomorrow and how that's going to impact the rotation, just because if that does in fact happen and maybe, you start Yeah, you probably start Mike, Jalen, TJ. I think it makes more sense to start TJ as another guy that can score instead of, Nikhil, especially if you're going to keep Donte in a minutes restriction. It's easier to control that off the bench, like I said. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the rotation tomorrow for sure.
Just real quick, I want to touch on this. I know you mentioned it at the top, but a discrepancy at the free throw line of 20 free throw attempts. Now, I know, again, Wolves had 4 techs, so there's 4 freebies, but the Lakers had 2 techs in there as well, and obviously one of those each canceled each other out. But, 32 of 46 attempts for the Lakers. Granted, 32 makes. They shot under 70% from the free throw line. Wolves 77%, 20 of 26. But again, such a huge discrepancy there. How frustrating was that? How big of a factor did that play in the game? And I guess just what did you see in that area of such an important team stat, I guess, tonight?
Yeah, I think you can probably take like 6 or 8 free throws off of that just because they're playing the foul game at the end. But even still,
sure.
I mean, the previous high for an opponent against the Timberwolves this season was 39 against the Raptors way back in November. And so tonight the Lakers shooting 46, even if it's more like 41, which I think is what it was before they got into the foul game. It was important that the Lakers got into the bonus early in that fourth quarter and did a good job of drawing fouls without them being shooting fouls. What do the Lakers have here? The Lakers had 6 non-shooting free throw trips, non-shooting foul free throw trips, really more like 4 when you consider that the last 2 were just playing the foul game. But yeah, I mean, the Lakers shot 35 free throws in the second half, and they were 24 of 35. They missed 11 of them. And that was, just as big of a reason as why the Wolves were in the game there at the end as anything else was the Lakers just missing free throws. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to dwell on it too much. I mean, the Lakers drive a ton, and so that's certainly part of it. You have LeBron James, you have Luka Doncic, you have Austin Reeves, 3 guys who drive a ton, draw a bunch of fouls with, even without needing to do all the foul grifting stuff. So again, I don't think that's why the Timberwolves lost this game. I think it's certainly a reason why, but the Timberwolves shot 12 of 41 from 3. They created a ton of wide open threes. Their best player got ejected. I mean, look, I if that's the number one reason why people think the Wolves are losing this game, I just don't necessarily agree with you. But okay.
Fair enough. Good breakdown there, Jack. Couple minutes left. Let's talk about the Utah game. That's tomorrow on the back-to-back. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. BetterHelp, when your schedule gets packed with work projects and more, it's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they're more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, maybe it's time to give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. It's so simple. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with the licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Utah Jazz up next on this back-to-back. A quick scouting report, I guess, on Utah, and also kind of touched on this, but what's the no-ant snowball effect look like? How much does that kind of change the landscape and kind of blueprint of this one? Or also, you think any of these guys, if you had to guess, get some rest on a back-to-back, just top of your head?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't, especially without Ant, it's going to be tough. And if they're, Utah has been sitting a bunch of guys. Like Colin Sexton has a legitimate ankle injury and has missed like the last 10 games. But Walker Kessler has had the tanking illness. Lauri Markkanen's had the tanking illness. I mean, a lot of guys they've just been sitting guys as a means of trying to lose games. And if there's one team that they're going to try to beat, it's the Timberwolves because they have the Timberwolves pick in this upcoming draft. So, yeah, I'd expect that you see a full effort from Utah tomorrow night. I'd expect that everybody plays. It sounds like Colin Sexton was upgraded to questionable. So, maybe he'll make his return. I think if you see a Colin Sexton and Terrence Shannon Jr. on the floor at the same time tomorrow, it's just going to be two guys, with, all the speed sliders turned up to 100 and all the aggressive sliders turned up to 100, just going at each other. I'd love to see those two guys in like an Oklahoma drill basketball style in the fast break. But it'll be a tough game just because the Jazz have, I think, more talent than their record indicates, and that's why they're trying to sit all these guys, because it's hard for them to just lose so many games that they're in the contention for the number one pick with the roster that they have. So I think, first and foremost, they need a much better night from Naz Reid. I'd fully expect that he'd be better. He started 0 of 8 from the floor tonight. Had only 3 points, which I'm sure is a season low for Naz. And then, you just hope that some of Jaden's shots go down and that you continue to, get strong play from TJ and Donte if he's able to go. So, if Donte doesn't go tomorrow on the second night of a back-to-back, which would certainly be understandable after not playing for 19 games, then Joe Ingles is going to have to be ready to go in Utah, and Rob Dillingham is going to need to bring a really solid effort going up against Isaiah Collier and Keontae George and Colin Sexton on the other end, because there's some good guards. That's a really good guard rotation, tanking team or not. So Wolves are going to have to bring it. And one other area too that they're going to have to be better in, offensive rebounding. LA had 16 offensive rebounds for 14 second chance points. That's an area that the Timberwolves have totally been controlling. They've been number one in second chance points scored, number one in second chance points allowed, number one in second chance points differential over the last 5 games. And another area they've been sneaky good in the last 5, they have the lowest turnover percentage in the NBA. So they've really been taking care of the ball after all the troubles we've talked about early in the season with this team and turnovers. They seem to have gotten over that to some degree here. And so, again, 12 tonight, but only 7 points off turnovers for the Lakers. So that's an area that they're going to have to keep at it and continue to play well. And I think, again, that's the reason they've been in a lot of these games, despite really shooting poorly from 3, is because they've been offensive rebounding it really well, and they've been taking care of the basketball. So if you can do those 2 things, I think they're going to be right in it, with Ant or without him, because they've still got plenty of talent to be able to go out there and get a win. They just need to, I guess, progress to the shooting mean a little bit if you're, Jaden or Naz or, or even Nikhil. So,
yeah. Last one real quick here, 60 seconds. Obviously this is a Timberwolves podcast, but all eyes have been on the Lakers since that Luka trade. 6th game he's been in a Laker uniform. They've won 4 in a row. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They're sitting at that 4 seed. Wolves, by the way, down at that 8 seed as of now. Just what do you think of the new look Los Angeles Lakers? And I mean, ceiling wise, I mean, are they right there with OKC as far as just how deadly and dangerous they could be once they mesh and put it all together come playoff time?
Yeah, I think they have a higher ceiling than OKC does, just because you have 2 of the best 5 ball handlers in the history of the NBA on
pretty
your team.
Good. I guess that's okay. I mean,
I just think, again, Oklahoma City only having 1 ball handler on their team is really tough come playoff time. And I think when you're the Lakers and you've got guys that can play the small ball 5 really effectively between Vanderbilt and Finney Smith and Hachimura and LeBron even, they're going to be able to go small super effectively because, in their small ball lineups, the smallest guy on their team is 6'5" out there. So it's just a bunch of wing sized guys out there. And JJ Redick has them, playing a really, really nice defensive scheme where they're just flying around. They're pre-rotating on the backside. They're sagging off guys. They're playing an aggressive 2-3 zone and trapping lead ball handlers like they did to Ant tonight in the first and second quarter of this game. They're going to be a really, really tough out, and they can beat any team in the Western Conference over a 7-game playoff series. And I think that's kind of the fun thing about the West is like, I think you look at everyone else that's out there, and I don't think you're saying that the Wolves can't beat insert team in a 7-game playoff series. It's just going to be, can they play well enough in order to do so? And I think you could say the same thing about the Lakers. I mean, they've had, one of the 3 or 4 best defensive ratings in the league, over the last, 2-3 weeks, especially since they got Finney Smith in there. And and JJ Redick just has been really smart with his rotations, and Jordan Goodwin's been really cool story for them too on a 2-way contract. He's been pretty productive for them off the bench, filling in when Dalton Connect hasn't really been giving them much of anything. So between that and then Austin Reeves becoming a legitimate awesome third banana, averaging like 22 and 7 since Christmas has been really nice for them. So fun team to watch, and would certainly encourage a lot of teams to, or a lot of guys, or people in the chat to check out them, and then check out the Warriors. Now since they've had Jimmy Butler, they've been a completely different team, and they've also been fun to watch.
Great stuff, man, per usual. T-Wolves chip away that 23-point deficit. They come up short. They run out of gas. Ant got ejected. 2 more techs. He'll miss tomorrow night's game versus Utah. Final score tonight versus the Lakers, 111-102, 32-28 on the year, sitting at that 8th seed as of now. As always, huge shout out to all the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. All you guys coming in the chat with us from game to game. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Go follow Jack on X at GRBorman13. He's live from the Target Center during almost every home game. Again, Jazz next tomorrow on the back-to-back, 8:30 p.m. tip. Catch you right here, same time, same place. But until then,